Hello my fellow dragons, it's your boy Travis here. As you all know, I am a huge fan of Spyro the Dragon. I grew up with the franchise and consider it my favorite video game franchise of all time. It's all about exploration, expressive characters, collecting treasure, lighting people on fire, and it just has everything I love about platform games. However, when it comes to a good franchise, especially one that I consider my favorite, there's gonna be some bumps on the road. In fact, as a Spyro fan myself, I'm not afraid to admit that the franchise has been mostly hit or miss since Insomniac stopped making Spyro games after Year of the Dragon and moved on to Ratchet & Clank. So in honor of what we're hoping to be the next Spyro game, I'd like to take a look at what I consider my favorite Spyro games and what I consider my least favorites. Before I begin though, just a quick disclaimer, no one is obligated to agree with me on these choices. After all, I'm just a 21-year-old weirdo who just likes stating opinions. So just take whatever I say with a grain of salt. Also, Skylanders and Reignited will both be excluded from both lists, but you will see them in the honorable mentions. So without further ado, sit back and relax. I'm Travis the Dragon, and these are the top 5 worst and best Spyro games.
Bring him on! I think I smell a barbecue.
And starting with the 5th worst, The Legend of Spyro, Dawn of the Dragon. Now, I know that this game has a fanbase. In fact, the Legend series as a whole has a fanbase as well. But believe it or not, this game has a lot of problems. Not to the point where it's unplayable, but it definitely has a lot of them regardless. The story is admittedly decent, but it's chock full of plot holes and issues. You can see a couple of examples right here. The character designs feel inconsistent, and they don't feel like they fit the environment. The low-budget animation, especially in the pre-rendered cutscenes, is painfully noticeable. It literally looks like an immature source filmmaker animation you see on YouTube. And I actually animate in SFM, but I haven't even talked about how terrible the models look. I know this game was supposed to look realistic given the fact that it was released during the early PS3 days, but these are honestly some of the worst models I've seen in the franchise as a whole. Spyro in this game in particular probably has my least favorite design because of it. You think he looks bad in Skylanders? Well, let me tell ya, the anatomy of his endgame model is gorgeous compared to this game. The proportions are completely broken. His chest is somehow bigger and his arms are somehow skinnier. His teeth make him look like a rejected Barney costume design, and whenever he moves, all of his limbs look like they've been broken in seconds. In fact, the same goes for Cinder. Come to think of it, even all the dragons suffer the same fate. Don't even get me started on Ignitus and Malefor. Ugh. The game also has 2 new voice actors for Cinder and Sparks this time. Cinder is voiced by Christina Ricci, and Sparks is voiced by Wayne Brady. Now, I have nothing against the 2 voice actors personally, and maybe they had a bad voice director, but the performances make me question if they're even trying to act, because they sound like they're just phoning it in for a quick paycheck.
Look, dragons! Yes, we are saved! Woo! Ah! Those are dragons! We are all gonna die!
You're right. Only you can do that. Please, Spyro, don't do this. Spyro, no. You don't have to do anything. Let's just go.
However, that's only the tip of the iceberg for this game. Personally, I don't like how it performs. Spyro and Cinder's designs have been matured up now because Sierra wanted them to have bigger wings so they'd be more useful for flying. The problem though is that even when you're flying, you're still stuck to the ground somehow. And to add insult to injury, there are a lot of winds that will either push you down or push you away. The frame rate will also lag at times if you fly too fast by rapidly spamming the jump button. You can still glide, climb, dodge, and breathe fire. They got rid of charging though, but if you replace Spyro with Cinder during the entire game, it'll seem like you're playing something different. In fact, just call it The Legend of Cinder or something. That's how different this game is. The general controls aren't that much better either. The movement feels strangely heavy, especially when you're carrying weights, and the combat is painfully awkward. Some of the movesets for each character are delayed too, giving you less time to attack as the enemies hit you first. However, if there is anything positive I will say about this game though, well, I do like how the graphics look, and I like the concept art too. In my opinion, it looks way better than how the characters look in the game. I'm also okay with the new co-op mode in the Spyro game, and I don't mind flying everywhere. I just wish it could have been executed better. The best thing about this game though is by far the soundtrack. It's no Stuart Copeland, but I actually like how well orchestrated it is. It ranges from being ominous, to peaceful and lush, to absolutely badass enemy fight scene mode. And I will be fair about this. Like the rest of the trilogy, this game has a lot of fans. Heck, I even have a few friends who are absolute fans of Legend of Spyro series. I don't exactly hate this game by any means, it's only number 5 on my worst list, but personally, it just isn't really for me. I consider Dawn of the Dragon to be mediocre at best. It's definitely far from terrible, but honestly, in my opinion, it could have been a lot better.
Are you ready for this?
I'm scared.
Just stay close to me.
Number 5 best. Year of the Dragon. Well now, what a way to end the original trilogy. This game is considered by many fans to be the best one in the trilogy. Heck, some might say it's the best Spyro game ever made, and I can see why. The graphics are so incredibly lush, especially on the PS1. You can tell that Insomniac really made the most out of those hardware limitations. Fun fact, Insomniac had to make each game in under a year. They had to do it lightning fast to meet the deadline. In fact, they even stated in the credits that they literally went through sleepless nights just to get this game done. In fact, this was Insomniac's final Spyro game they ever made before they started working on Ratchet & Clank, and this trilogy definitely went out with a bang. Outside of Spyro, there are many different characters you can play as: Sheila the Kangaroo, Sergeant Bird, Bentley the Yeti, and Agent 9 the Space Monkey. And for the first time ever, you even get to play as Sparks. This is also the first Spyro game where Sparks has his own voice actor. Moneybags is still there to con you out of your money, even more than usual.
Small fee?
But you actually get to beat him up at the end of the game and take all your money back, which in my opinion is the absolute best and the most satisfying part of the game. Nothing like some good payback. Get it? Payback? Because you're taking back all your money that you paid moneybags?
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
There's also those skateboarding levels where there are 2 challenges to be had in order to earn a dragon egg. The skateboarding levels are really cool though. You get to do a lot of neat tricks here, and the skateboarding levels have some of the best level designs in the game. Totally radical, dude. That being said, there are some problems that I have with this game that unfortunately put it at number 5. Other than Spyro, Sheila is the best playable character in this game. Sergeant Bird is alright, I guess. Same goes for Bentley, I suppose. Except when I'm playing the Reignited version. But Agent 9 has some of the worst levels in the game, mainly because of how badly he controls. Thank goodness they were improved in Reignited. Sparks' levels are, meh. The game also has probably the weakest soundtrack in the trilogy, and it's not really as good as the soundtrack for the first 2 games. The same goes for the level designs. Maybe it's just me nitpicking and I'm probably biased or something, but I can't help but feel like the level design is somehow really flat. Also, I can't stand Harbor Speedway. It's one of the worst things ever and I hate it. But that's the very few problems I have with this game. I'm sort of mixed on the rest of it, and I consider it a good game, but not a great game. Despite that though, Insomniac definitely ended the original trilogy on a high note, and that alone is commendable.
Well, I guess we'll have to find the rest of the eggs by ourselves.
And as for the 4th worst, enter the Dragonfly. Let's face it, we all knew this game was going to be on the list. Enter the Dragonfly is actually the most infamous game in the franchise. In fact, this unfortunately gave Spyro a bad name. So let's see how terrible this game is together, shall we? I'm going to start with the positives first though, just to be fair. Thanks to Stuart Copeland returning, the music is still really good and it gives the same vibes from the original trilogy. And the graphics are surprisingly lush and colorful, even for a PS2 game released in 2002. And it looks like how a Spyro game should, if you ignore the horribly designed models. Ripto, my boy, what have they done to you? Unfortunately, that's where my praise for this game ends, because it suffers from so many problems here. The game is meant to run in 60 frames per second, but the frame rate is constantly lagging and it makes the game as a whole look like a cheap 1996 PC game. The controls feel like you're controlling a toy robot. In other words, the movement feels really sluggish and the jumping mechanic is floaty too. There's actually a new gimmick in this game where you can now use more breath abilities other than fire, such as ice, electric, and bubble breath. Bubble breath is mostly important for rescuing dragonflies that were scattered all over the world, which is a lot more annoying than it has any right to be because in Bianca's words,
"They're shy and will probably run away from you anytime you come near them."
What makes this game even worse than it should be though, is that it's chock full of bugs and glitches. But even without all that, the levels are somehow poorly designed. In fact, they all feel kind of empty and somehow even flatter than Year of the Dragon. They all just feel lifeless. At least the music's good. There are also some characters you see in the start of the game, such as Bianca and Moneybags, but you only see them once and then never again, at least not until the end of the game. What was even the point in putting them in this game in the first place? And the icing on the cake is the loading times. You'll be seeing those loading times a lot depending on the level you go to, and each of them takes an eternity. Okay, not really, but it feels like an eternity. They take 45 seconds to a minute, which makes the loading times in Sonic 06 look like they can be done almost instantly. and that game came out years later. The worst thing about this game though, is the fact that it was rushed out the doors for holiday season of 2002. Now, just to be clear, this is not the developers' fault. They were simply doing their job, and you can see that they did the best they could with this game. But the problem is that Universal, the company that owned the rights to Spyro and Crash at the time, treated the developers horribly. In fact, they forced the developers to release the game to meet the deadline, which unfortunately resulted in rushed development. The game wouldn't be so bad if Universal gave them more time to polish the game. In fact, they should have just delayed the release date for 2003 or something. And you guys think Activision did Spyro dirty? The most depressing thing about it is that not only did the game sell horribly, but it also unfortunately caused permanent damage to the franchise. Stuart Copeland quit composing music for Spyro games altogether because of this game. And this also caused nearly all the voice actors to quit too. And sadly, they even lost Spyro's voice actor Tom Kenny. But he did come back to voice Spyro again in Reignited. This also resulted as the only video game the developers Check 6 ever made. I understand that there are people who are fans of this game though, so if you happen to like Enter the Dragonfly, then that's perfectly okay, more power to you. But you have to understand that this game left a haunting mark on the franchise.
Well, that's what you get for playing with your little sticks.
And for the fourth best, The Legend of Spyro: A New Beginning. Now, just to be clear, I'm not exactly as big of a fan of the Legend series as I used to be, but I won't deny that I have nostalgic memories with it. This is probably the best one in the reboot series. The Legend of Spyro series is actually a reboot of the classic franchise, because Sierra, having recently acquired the rights to Spyro and Crash at the time, wanted Spyro to be darker than ever before. And when I say dark, I mean dark and serious. I feel like this might be why this reboot has so many fans, because of how dark and deep the story is. And to be fair, this was the mid-2000s, and it was during the time where beloved gaming franchises had this phase where they had to be dark and edgy, in an attempt to appeal to mature players. I'm looking at you, Sonic, and I didn't forget you either, Shadow.
Where's that damn fourth Chaos Emerald?
So the story for this game is that every 10 generations, a purple dragon is born, and the prophecy says that a purple dragon, the rarest breed of their kind, can wield many elements that others cannot. This includes fire, electricity, ice, and earth. And since Spyro is one of the rare purple dragons, his destiny is to save the world, because according to the prophecy, Spyro is the chosen one.
Wait, this guy, Spyro, some special once-in-a-purple thing?
Nowadays, I tend to roll my eyes at those chosen one stories nowadays because I feel like they're extremely cliche at this point. The same goes for Spyro being adopted by a family of dragonflies and not realizing he's a purple dragon yet. Like, seriously, when has this not been done? Are they trying to turn Spyro into Hercules or Goku or something? But anyway, Spyro eventually finds out that Cinder, the main villain of this game, was corrupted by the Dark Master Malifaux and has taken over the world, and now it's up to Spyro to save the day. Oh, and speaking of Cinder, here's a little fun fact. This game is actually her first ever appearance, and up until Skylanders Academy, she's made a bunch of appearances ever since. For a reboot of the Spyro franchise, I honestly didn't mind this game. It's more of an action-adventure game that focuses heavily on combat. But what makes me appreciate the game the most is probably the art style, character designs, and how amazing the soundtrack is. Even if it's not composed by Stuart Copeland, I still enjoy listening to it. Another interesting fact is that there's an amazing amount of well-known voice actors in this game. Spyro is voiced by Elijah Wood, who is well known as Frodo from Lord of the Rings, Mumble from Happy Feet, and Wirt from Cartoon Network's Over the Garden Wall.
This is your home, Sparks. But I just found out that my home is out there somewhere.
Wait, that's dumb.
What?
That's dumb. I'm not just gonna wander around in the woods for the rest of my life.
Sparks is voiced by David Spade, who you may remember as the voice of Cusco from The Emperor's New Groove.
Hey, listen, forget about those cracks I made about your fatness and your being purple and stupid and fat. All right?
Don't tell me. We're about to go over a huge waterfall.
Yep.
Sharp rocks at the bottom?
Most likely.
Bring it on.
And Ignitus is voiced by Gary Oldman, who would later go on to be Lord Shen from Kung Fu Panda 2.
There are times when all of us need to stand up to danger.
The only reason you're still alive is that I find your stupidity mildly amusing.
I think what I like the most about Ignitus is that he acts like a father figure to Spyro. I like certain characters being parent figures to the protagonists. It helps build their relationship very well.
My time for heroics is past, but with your help, we might be able to beat Cinder.
I can't, Ignitus. I just learned what I am.
You can, Spyro. You can. You are a purple dragon, a very special creature.
If there are any problems this game has though, it noticeably has a low budget. I feel like a lot of it was spent on celebrity voice actors. That might be why the graphics don't have the highest quality despite being released on PS2, which by the way was in 2006. Another problem I have with it is that the combat can be pretty repetitive. Enemies will be constantly thrown at you and fighting through them can be a chore. That being said, there is one thing that makes the repetition worth it though. If you upgrade any element to maximum, they'll be much stronger and you can finish your foes off more quickly. My personal favorites are those earth bombs that you can use to send your enemies flying until they fall to the ground, and electricity that you can use to throw enemies off the stage, which I find really funny. Maybe it's just my nostalgia blindness, but despite the problems, I still find this game a lot of fun to play. It's personally my favorite Legend game, and certainly one of the best Spyro games out there.
Well done, young dragon. Thanks, Ignitus.
And the third worst Spyro game is The Legend of Spyro: The Eternal Night. Oh my god. Just wow. How did we go from a new beginning to this? This was the second installment to the reboot trilogy that was developed a year after A New Beginning, and a year prior to Dawn of the Dragon, to be fair. So, the plot of this game takes place a few weeks after the events of A New Beginning. Cinder decides to leave the temple for good, because after what happened during her corruption, she felt like she didn't belong in the temple with the elders.
I'm leaving, Spyro. I don't belong here. After all I've done, all I've put you through, I can't stay, Spyro. Your place is here. Your destiny is here. But mine is somewhere out there for me to find.
So she runs off to find her destiny, and to make matters worse, the night of eternal darkness is near, and the ape King Gaul has returned to kill all the dragons. There's no explanation to what beef they have with the dragons or why they want to kill them so badly. So throughout the games, Spyro will randomly pass out and wake up in a dream world, so he can regain all of his elemental abilities he lost after his fight with Cinder in the previous game. And the one thing that will be guiding you through it is the Chronicler, an ancient dragon who strangely has an obsession with bugs. Oh, I forgot to mention that Sparks has a new voice actor now. And you want to take a guess on who it is?
I'm just ready to begin the best day ever now that the evil psycho she-dragon is gone.
I will give this game credit where credit's due though. Billy West is honestly the best voice actor for Sparks in this trilogy. Unlike David Spade and Wayne Brady, it seems like he was actually immersed in this role, and his voice actually fits him a lot better in my opinion. However, that's not really saying much about Sparks in this game, because to be honest, it's really hard for me to like him in this game. He's somehow much more obnoxious and annoying than he was in the last game, and he's also kind of a jerk. Despite Cinder being freed from her corruption, he harbors a complete lack of trust towards her and suspects that she's still evil somehow.
Cinder, nobody blames you for what happened.
Huh, I do. Speak for yourself.
What is wrong with you, Sparks? Were you not paying attention to Ignitus' story? Speaking of Cinder, she feels really pointless in this game. We don't really see her much, and the only times we do are in the pirate ship and in the Well of Souls. She could have at least been a playable character like in Dawn of the Dragon, or had her own levels or something so we could see more of her. But nope, she's just there. Talk about wasted potential. The story admittedly sounds decent on paper, but that's more than I can say about the execution. The writing is really stupid and it just feels as weak as water. In fact, here's the entire story in a nutshell. Sparks, how many times do I have to tell you that Cinder only did all that stuff because she was being manipulated?
And how many times do I have to tell you that she's still evil? You really shouldn't trust her, bro. She's looking a little, what's the word I'm looking for?
Do not say the thing, Sparks. Don't you dare say it.
I was gonna say she was looking a little, moody.
Oh, well, I mean, she does feel kind of bad after what happened a few weeks ago, so,
Also, Cinder was kind of sus.
Hello, Spyro. Brought you here to tell you that the solar eclipse is happening, and people who aren't wearing sunglasses are gonna go blind after staring at it too long. I also brought you here to tell you how to use the time thingy that I will never bring up again, and bring back your powers.
Okay, but what about Cinder?
That's not important right now, Spyro. First, you need to get your ability.
I'm not doing a single thing until you tell me where she is.
You are such a simp. Welcome, Spyro. You're just in time to witness my plan to kill all the dragons.
Okay, but why though?
Why? Because dragons are illegal in this country, and they should go back to whatever country they came from. They're ruining our economy.
I haven't even talked about the gameplay yet though. The budget for this game was so low that they had to reuse a lot of assets from A New Beginning and reskin them, and it's painfully noticeable. Not only that, but the graphics also took a major downgrade. Maybe it's just me, but the graphics are so ugly. It's less colorful than A New Beginning, making the game look gloomy. I get that being dark is what the game is going for, but come on. The textures are also compressed as well, even in the Wii version. The sound design is also really bad. Sometimes there's little to no sound effects even in the cutscenes, making every single event underwhelming. There's also times where the characters' voices get drowned out by either the sound effects or the music. The combat is also even more forced and repetitive than last time, and was somehow cranked up to 11. Even the levels drag on for what feels like forever. I'm okay with games lasting longer than 3 hours, but I don't have much patience for being in the same levels for 40 minutes to an hour. Are you serious? And here's the kicker. The difficulty for this game is set at a maximum level. In fact, the difficulty spikes are so ridiculously high that it makes Crash 4 look like a cakewalk. And that's not a good thing. I'm surprised I even beat this game at all without having to use a cheat code, because it's nearly impossible to beat this game without it. There's also this new Dragon Time mechanic that you can use to slow down time and defeat enemies more easily until it expires, but you'll burn through time faster than you'll realize. And even so, you'll constantly get knocked back by enemies and have less time to recover and defend yourself. I'm all for a challenge, but this game wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't so painfully tedious. By far, the best thing about this game is Dark Spyro. This is definitely the worst one of the Legend series, and certainly one of the worst Spyro games out there.
You stink!
And for the third best, A Hero's Tale. So when this game was first released, it got mixed reviews. I'll definitely agree that it's not a perfect masterpiece, but I will admit that I had a lot of fun with this game. So I'm gonna get the obvious problems out of the way just for the sake of it. The charging and flaming controls were changed for some reason. The two characters Ember and Flame are literally pointless because we only see them once and then never again, which makes me question why people love them so much. And Sparks and Blink have some of the worst levels ever, especially Blink. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's get back to the topic at hand. In this game, an evil dragon named Red is working with Nasty Nork and his minions to spread dark gems all over the place to take over the world, and it's up to Spyro to learn all about Red and stop him from doing so. So the plot is already simple and straightforward. You find the Dragon Elders, learn about Red, learn some new moves, destroy the dark gems, and defeat Red. You know, plain and simple. But why do I enjoy this game, you may ask? Well, believe it or not, despite its obvious problems, it has a lot of improvements that make this game far better than Enter the Dumpster will ever be. The controls are surprisingly smooth as butter, in fact, almost as smooth as Reignited. I didn't mind playing as Hunter because, unlike the other three playable characters, he doesn't have any missions that we have to play through twice to get a Dragon Egg and a Light Gem. You'll just find them both in the same level. Another thing I like is that all the dialogue is fully animated. The animations are much more expressive now, which helps bring life to the characters. Gems are also used as currency instead of collectibles this time around. I've heard people complain about it, but I honestly didn't mind that. Moneybags is still his usual greedy self, but at least some of the stuff in his shop is worth spending gems on this time. I honestly don't see the problem. My favorite thing about this game though is the graphics. Even for a 2004 PS2 game, the visuals and art style are so incredibly colorful. I love the art direction this game had. It has some of my favorite level designs in the franchise. This game also does something new in the main levels. For example, instead of just simply going through the portals and entering certain levels, we just head right towards the levels depending on the paths we take, and they're surprisingly huge. I love it. I guess the only problem I have with this game though is that the voices don't really fit some of the characters. You might remember Just Harnell as the voice actor of Crash Bandicoot. In this game, he voiced the majority of the characters, including some of the Elders, Red, Hunter, and even Spyro himself. Jess has done a great job with some of the characters, but with all due respect, for some reason, his voice doesn't really fit Spyro and Hunter very well. Considering they both share the same voice actor, they both sound way too similar to each other.
Nasty Nork? Didn't I defeat that guy years ago? Hey, Spyro, it's good to see you again. You see this cave behind me? Well, it looks like you're not gonna fit through there. Don't you wish it were me?
And I know it's just me being nitpicky and everything, but Jess's voice sounds like he was having a cold at the recording booth. I'm not gonna lie, that could be a possibility.
Dragon eggs? Oh yeah, I found one of those. Maybe I can find all the dragon eggs for you. You know, I'm gonna be out saving the world anyway.
In all fairness though, his voice does sound close to how Spyro sounded in the first game, so points to him for trying. Understandably, because of the failure of Enter the Dumpster, every single character had to be recast. The only voice actor who stayed with the franchise until A Hero's Tale was Sparks' voice actor, and points to him for staying.
Spyro always used to send me into cracks like this.
And because the franchise lost Stuart Copeland, the guy behind the soundtracks of the original trilogy and Enter the Dumpster, they had to get new composers for the soundtrack of this game. But to be honest, they all did a great job. I just love how the music sounds in some of the levels. Sometimes I'd even listen to the soundtrack when I'm either drawing or animating. They even composed music for the cutscenes as well, which could almost make this game feel like an animated movie. Also, this may be an unpopular opinion, but I personally don't feel like this game is a continuation to the franchise. Due to the wide amount of differences it has, it feels more like a soft reboot. This game may not be a perfect masterpiece, but for what it is, I appreciate what the developers tried to deliver. If some of the problems were ironed out though, it would definitely be much higher on the list. I know it's my nostalgic bias, but I personally consider A Hero's Tale one of my favorite Spyro games, and I wouldn't mind playing it again next time I boot up my PS2.
So, are we gonna do this thing or what?
And worst Spyro game number 2? Shadow Legacy. Have you ever wanted a lackluster RPG game made exclusively for Nintendo DS that's apparently supposed to be a mainline game for your otherwise favorite franchise? Then may I present to you Shadow Legacy. And I wish I was kidding about it being a mainline Spyro game, but the story apparently continues right after A Hero's Tale, which, by the way, is canonically part of the original franchise. So basically, this is Spyro the Dragon number 6, and arguably the slowest, most monotonous, and most repetitive sequel in the franchise. And considering Enter the Dumpster, that's saying a lot. The plot for this game is that the evil sorcerer has spread darkness all over the realms and imprisoned many innocent people, and dark creatures have been scattered everywhere, and even Spyro's usual moveset won't affect them. So he learns new combat powers from the elders in the Dragon Dojo to take on those dark creatures and defeat the sorcerer once and for all. I'm not gonna lie, that actually sounds like a decent story. It's unlike anything we've ever seen in a classic Spyro game. Unfortunately, that's the only praise this game's getting from me. I don't know if anyone else noticed, but this game is pretty much a prototype for the Legend of Spyro series, which by the way would come out a year later after this game. It's got the same combat moveset, and it has the same story where Red was corrupted by evil, just like Cinder, and the sorcerer is pretty much prototype Malifaux. I wonder if Sierra was actually trying to make Spyro darker before the reboot was even a thing. But even so, there's a lot of problems this game has. Because your flame and charge attacks have no effect on the enemies from the Dark Realm, not only do they feel completely pointless and useless, but it also makes the combat somehow feel even more forced. The main objective is to fight dark enemies to free the prisoners, go through side quests, learn new moves from the elders, rinse, and repeat. The additional salt to the open wound is that not only is this game repetitive, but it's also extremely slow to the point where it drags on for far too long. Even charging feels like you're moving at a snail's pace unless you're lucky enough to upgrade it. And on top of this, the music is badly compressed as well to the point where it's almost difficult to listen to. The only part of the soundtrack I kind of liked was probably the one from Dragon Shores. It's not great, but it's at least tolerable. You may have also noticed that Spyro doesn't talk at all in this game. I've been told that since it's an RPG game, the star is apparently not allowed to talk for some reason. I mean, it would kind of make sense for Crash Bandicoot since he doesn't have much of a talking role to begin with, but that's besides the point. Honestly, I have nothing else to say about this game. I'm all for an RPG Spyro game because I feel like it would be a good concept, but it was poorly executed to the point where it's just not good enough to get me immersed into it. It's absurdly repetitive, The combat feels forced, the controls are painfully slow, and this game is overall just really boring. Honestly, you're better off playing other RPG games and staying far away from this one like the plague.
Just look away.
And moving on to the second best, Spyro 2, Ripto's Rage. Or if you live in the UK, Gateway to Glimmer. Now this one is the prime definition of a classic. This is actually the game that many people, including myself, remember fondly. In fact, a lot of people consider it to be the best Spyro game of all time. After beating Nasty Nork in the previous game, Spyro decides that he wants to take a well-deserved vacation in Dragon Shores. Unfortunately, he ends up in Avalor where he meets Hunter, Allura, the Professor, and the main villain of the game, Ripto, who has a huge hatred against dragons.
I hate dragons!
It turns out that they needed a dragon to stop Ripto from taking over Avalor, and Spyro is just the dragon for the job. Unlike Spyro 1, there's a lot more story added to the game, which I personally like. The game features a whole new moveset, such as hovering, swimming, climbing, and head bashing. They're all very useful, especially hovering, which can help you gain a little extra height, in case you accidentally bump into the edge of a platform and fall. Sadly, the game got rid of the rolling mechanic from the first game for some reason, but thankfully it was brought back and reignited. What everyone remembers fondly is the intro and outro cutscenes for every single level. They show us who the characters are and what to expect from said levels. I think it's a very nice detail they added. My personal favorite thing about this game is how memorable the dialogue is. I love hearing the characters say their iconic lines in this game, such as,
"Is this rain ever gonna stop? I've forgotten what the sun looks like."
I'm a fawn, you dork.
Oh.
Yeah, how about 22475? That's my birthday.
And of course, we can't forget the infamous
Trouble with the trolley, eh?
This was also the first time Tom Kenny ever voiced Spyro. Tom Kenny is well known for his iconic voice acting roles, such as the Ice King from Adventure Time, the Mayor from the Powerpuff Girls, and even SpongeBob SquarePants himself.
Hey, stop staring! Haven't you guys ever seen a dragon before?
This guy is an absolute legend. What more can I say about Spyro 2? It's such a classic. I guess the only part about this game that I don't like is the popcorn challenge in Magma Cone. Personally, my least favorite level in the entire game. Don't even get me started on that stupid alchemist! But ignoring that, I find this game overall to be a memorable nostalgia trip. The levels are well designed, the music is catchy, the graphics are beautifully colorful, the characters are unforgettable, and it's overall a lot of fun. If you're a big fan of open world collectathons, then this is the perfect game for you.
Wow, this is great!
And before we get to the worst and best of the Purple Boy, it's time to take a look at some of my honorable mentions. Reignited Trilogy. Obviously, many of you have seen me gush about this game many times. It's personally my favorite way to play Spyro. The graphics are a lot more lush, the controls are smooth as butter, the characters are a lot more expressive now, Spyro is absolutely adorable, I still can't stop simping for Allura, and it overall makes the trilogy a definitive experience. But the reason Reignited isn't on my best list is because it's an obvious choice, and would easily make the #1 best Spyro game, and I didn't want to make this list too easy. Plus, it's a remake of the original 3 games, and I can't talk about any of them twice. But Reignited definitely gets an honorable mention. The Skylanders franchise. Interestingly, many people have argued that this is the worst version of Spyro to date, mainly because of this particular design. And although I can see why people don't like this design, it shouldn't be the sole reason to hate the franchise. I'm not as big of a Skylanders fan as I used to be, because it started getting bland in 2016, but there are some things that I do appreciate about the franchise. The graphics and character animations are surprisingly good, even by 2011 standards. And the concept of bringing collectible toys to life is honestly kind of awesome. Another thing I personally like about Skylanders is that the main villain Chaos is actually voiced by Richard Horvitz himself. He was actually the same guy who did the voice for Invader Zim, Billy from Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, Lonnie Lully from Crash Bandicoot, and he's currently voicing Moxie from VivziePop's Hell of a Boss.
Are you filming us right now?
And his performance as Chaos honestly makes him a really entertaining character for me.
My head is awesome, I tell you! Fear it! Fear my giant floating head!
My personal favorite thing about this franchise is the soundtrack in every game. It's well composed, and I like listening to it on my phone sometimes. It sounds like it would actually fit an animated movie. In fact, the composers for said soundtrack actually did work on a few movies. The reason Skylanders isn't on either list is because, one, despite the first game being called Spyro's Adventure and having Spyro in it, Skylanders is technically a different franchise, and advertisement-wise, it focuses more on other characters than Spyro, and it doesn't have much to do with him. And two, Skylanders is the most debatable topic. It's hated by a lot of Spyro fans solely because he's either not the main character, his personality was changed in the now cancelled Netflix show, or his design just isn't what the classic design used to be. And honestly, I'm just really tired of this argument. They brought the old Spyro back anyway, so I don't see the point in this argument anymore. Although it doesn't have my favorite version of Spyro personally, I honestly don't mind playing Skylanders whenever I'm in the mood for it. I consider Skylanders a harmless franchise, especially the Netflix show Skylanders Academy, the Spyro Game Boy Advance trilogy. Some of you may disagree with me on this, but I think the Game Boy Advance trilogy is actually really good. It has the same charm as the original PS1 games, and despite the music not being composed by Stuart Copeland, it's still pretty catchy to listen to. All I can say is that they're all pretty solid. There's little else to say. The Legend of Spyro for Game Boy Advance and Nintendo DS. It's probably worth mentioning that there are even portable versions of the Legend reboot. I'll just say right now that A New Beginning for DS and GBA are both my guilty pleasures, and I think the GBA version of the Eternal Night is actually really good, but the DS version of the Eternal Night and Dawn of the Dragon just really suck. But again, regardless of the platform, I can't talk about any of the games more than once. The Java games. Did you know that Spyro actually had some mobile games back in the mid to late 2000s? No? Well, now you do. Sadly, I wasn't able to play any of these mobile games. I did look up playthroughs of them though, and they all look pretty good. I love how the sprites were done and how the visuals look, but the animations look kind of weird for some reason. And without further ado, here we go. And the #1 worst Spyro game is... Spyro Orange, The Cortex Conspiracy. At this point, we might as well just call it the Crossover Conspiracy, because that's literally what this game is. Where do I begin with this mess? So, back in 2004, Spyro had a GBA exclusive crossover with Crash Bandicoot, where they both took on each other's enemies. I honestly like the idea of a crossover between Spyro and Crash because, believe it or not, they've basically been brothers since the very beginning. Although I never actually grew up with Crash like I did with Spyro, there are some games in the franchise that I do really like, such as Twin Sanity, the original trilogy, the N. Sane trilogy, Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled, and Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time. On paper, a crossover between the two sounds really cool. Unfortunately, that's a lot more than I can say about the execution. I haven't played Crash Purple, so I can't really comment on it, but Spyro Orange, I can confirm that this is an absolute disaster of a game. The game starts with Ripto and Dr. Cortex being friends now. That's it, they're just friends now, deal with it. And their plan is to turn Spyro and Crash against each other, which ultimately backfires because Spyro and Crash also team up against them. Yeah, the plot is really silly, but honestly, I can forgive that, because the gameplay is absolutely atrocious. This is literally the worst Spyro experience I've ever had in my life. Can I even call this thing a Spyro game? The controls in the hub worlds consist of breathing fire, head bashing, and fluttering around in the air by spamming the A button. There's no gliding, no charging, just potentially destroying the button to safely get to other platforms, which physically hurts. I don't even like having to work with the controls or how the levels were designed. You have to make constant leaps of faith, which will often result in either falling into a pit or getting knocked back by an enemy and fall into a pit. But how awful the controls are is the least of this game's problems. The whole game is just a marathon of minigames, and all of which are dreadful. They all range from driving a jeep, driving a tank, Star Fox, Space Invaders, opening a gate, melting a block of ice, and the list goes on. What's even worse is that they're all ridiculously repetitive. The gameplay never changes, and there's literally almost no variety in these minigames whatsoever. Most of them are just reskinned copies of each other. Where's the originality? Did they just stop trying or something? Despite the title claiming that it's a Spyro game, it feels nothing like such. In fact, it feels more like a Crash Bandicoot spin-off. Just replace Spyro with any other Crash character, and even then, it would still be terrible. None of the minigames are enjoyable. They're slow, they're too easy, they completely lack originality, and they all physically hurt to go through. There's also Moneybags Shop, where you can spend gems on trading cards, if you're lucky enough, but none of the trading cards have any purpose. They're either just sprites of the characters from the game, or just stock images you can find on Google. But that's not even the worst part about this game. Here's something that really adds insult to injury. In order to access the final boss, you have to complete every single minigame, not once, not twice, but 3 times. I am dead serious. That's what makes this game even worse. Not only is this game repetitive with little to no variety, but it forces you to backtrack 3 times to beat the game. That is literally everything I hate about backtracking in games. Yes, there is backtracking in Spyro 2 and 3, but at least they're optional. Depending on your progress, at least they don't force you to complete every single level, unless you're a completionist. The only times you have to revisit levels is if you either complete a mission after obtaining either a new ability or a character, or find any gems you may have missed. Here though, Backtracking is completely forced. How does this game expect me to be motivated to go through every single minigame over and over again if I don't even want to do it more than once? What's the excuse for this? The controls are abysmal, the minigames have little to no variety, the cards are completely pointless, the still images make Gnasty Gnorc look beautiful, and the unnecessary backtracking is painful. At least some of the other bad games on this list have given me something to enjoy. Hell, I find Enter the Dumpster and The Eternal Suffering more enjoyable. But this? There's literally no fun to be had with this garbage whatsoever. The most depressing thing about it is that as of making this video, Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled and Crash on the Run are the closest things to a decent crossover we have right now. I consider the Crossover Conspiracy the absolute worst Spyro game I'm ever willing to play again, and it is my hope that no future Spyro game ends up like this.
Get lost, loser!
And the #1 best Spyro game is... Spyro the Dragon.
Looks like I've got some things to do.
I know it's weird that I chose the first of its kind to be the #1 best Spyro game, but I honestly can't help it. I grew up with this game. This was actually the first console game I ever played when I was little, and I've had a blast with it since then. In this game, all the dragons are being interviewed by Bob, who wants to know what they think of Gnasty Gnorc. Lindar steps in to describe Gnasty Gnorc as a simple creature, no threat, and proceeds to call him ugly, which for Gnasty, of course, is the straw that broke the camel's back.
Ugly? That does it!
To the point where he freezes all the dragons except for Spyro. So the goal for this game is to recover the treasure, which by the way Gnasty has turned into his own personal minions, recover the dragon eggs that the thieves have stolen, free the dragons from their crystal prison of course, and defeat Gnasty Gnorc himself. There are 5 dragon worlds you can go to, and each of them, including the levels, are based on the dragon families. The artisans are the talented type of dragons who can create art, such as sculptures, music, and lots more. The peacekeepers are the fighting type of dragons who hone their skills in battle, becoming honored veterans. The magic crafters are the magical type of dragons who can, well, create magic artifacts, and they tend to be shy around other creatures. The beast makers can create, well, beasts, and they like to live in swamps too. And the dream weavers are the peacekeepers of the night, and they make sure no nightmares bother anyone while they're asleep. The 6th and final world is Gnorc Nexus, which is actually a dragon junkyard where Gnasty was banished for generally causing trouble. There are so many reasons why I love this game so much, and why I have such fond memories with it. It's definitely my own nostalgia blindness, but that's only one of the reasons. Even on the PS1, the graphics are incredibly lush and colorful. It has a good amount of shading, and the textures are beautifully detailed, and the lands I come across are very lively. The music really slaps too. In fact, most of the time, I like to listen to any part of the soundtrack on my phone, and it's all thanks to the drummer of the Police, Stuart Copeland.
You mind not interrupting me when I'm working?
But my absolute favorite thing about this game is the interactions between Spyro and the Elders. I enjoy seeing the protagonist communicate with NPCs, and it helps give the players an impression on who Spyro is as a character.
Hold your horns! Here comes Spyro!
Even with the limited cast at the time, they still did an amazing job as many of the characters. There were actually 2 voice actors as well. In fact, Carlos Elizraki was the very first voice actor of Spyro. You may remember him as Rocco from Rocco's Modern Life, and even that surfer fish from SpongeBob.
That was too funny. You are hilarious.
Clancy Brown also did the voice work for most of the Elders from this game, and you might mostly remember him as Dr. Neo Cortex, Uka Uka, and even Mr. Krabs himself. And depending on your progress or how much stuff you have, there's little to no backtracking in this game, which personally I think is such a relief. The only times you do have to backtrack is if you either don't have enough treasure, eggs, or dragons to access different worlds, or haven't reached 100% yet. Every time I play this game though, I always go for 120% and complete level after level until I reach Gnasty's loot, because completing this game, in my opinion, is really satisfying, especially when you get all the treasure in the final level. The only thing in this game that I wish was improved is the bosses. I don't mind chasing them down after a hit they take, but they're all just kind of anticlimactic, and they don't really feel much like boss fights. And sadly, the same can also be said for Gnasty. He is supposed to be the big bad guy that we're supposed to take down, right? So what gives? Speaking of Gnasty, I also wish he had more screen time, and I wish there was also more story added to the game. which was later added in its 2 sequels. But to be fair, my guess is that Insomniac didn't know what they were doing with Spyro yet. This was one of their first games ever, so obviously they were still trying to provide whatever they could, even with the limitations. But what makes me appreciate this game even more though, is how Reignited enhanced the experience for me. Instead of the dragons just being copy-paste versions of each other with different skins, they all had their own designs, and the expressive animations helped show their personalities better. I just really love the passion and effort that was put into the remake. Spyro 1 has always been a childhood favorite that I'll take any excuse to play again in the future, because regardless of age or how many times I play it, I don't think I'll ever get tired of this game. I consider Spyro the Dragon to be my #1 personal favorite Spyro game of all time, and I look forward to playing it again sometime soon.
How do you feel?
I feel fired up, Bob. And I'm happy for the Dragon World, of course.
You know, despite some of the junk that we've occasionally gotten, even some of the worst games aren't enough to stop me from loving Spyro. As I like to say often, no game franchise is perfect, no matter how good they are. And that's okay, because past mistakes can help developers grow and learn to create better and more beautiful masterpieces. And if Spyro 4 eventually happens, I hope the developers will be able to set the bar even higher for the franchise, because I want Spyro to succeed again more than ever. So regardless of which era you remember Spyro in, he'll always have a special place in our hearts. With all that said and done, I thank you for joining me in this video. It was a lot of hard work, but it was all worth it. If you happen to have a favorite or least favorite Spyro game yourself, or if there's anything I might have left out, let me know down below. I want to give a huge thank you to my friend SpongeBandamark for making this thumbnail. He's an extremely talented artist and a lovely person to talk to, and it would mean the world to him if you could go to his Twitter and give him the love and support he deserves. Thanks again for watching, and as always, take care and stay safe.
I'd say the sky's the limit.
Hey guys, so before I end things off, I just want to give a huge thank you to my amazing friends for their love and support. And of course, keeping a smile on my face even during my bad days. And of course, I also want to thank them for keeping me motivated to make the video that I always wanted to make. And to some of my best friends watching this right now, I love you guys, you're super awesome, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And of course, I also want to thank you, the viewer, for watching this as well, and I hope you all stay safe.